Hey, welcome to the Small Business Made Simple podcast, brought to you by socialmediaandmarketing.com.au. Being in business is never easy, but it can be simple, or at least simpler. Join me, your host Jen Donovan, every week where we focus on marketing, social media, and working towards simplifying your business. You with me? Let's do this.
Dream it big, 'cause someone out there listening. Everyone's got a voice to give, and it's time I heard you whistling, 'cause there's no point at all, in dreaming small.
Why, hey there, my fabulous listener. Welcome to episode 158 of the Small Business Made Simple podcast. Thank you, as always, and I don't say this lightly every week. I know I repeat myself, but I don't say it lightly. Thank you for tuning in. I know you have lots of choices out there, and I really do appreciate you making my podcast one of them. If you're enjoying this podcast, though, I'd really love to hear from you, because it's the one thing that podcasting does that's so frustrating for someone who loves analytics and stats so much is I don't get many. So I don't know you unless you reach out to me. So I would really love to connect with you on social, or do a screenshot and tag me so that I can be one of your biggest supporters as well. And of course, all the show notes for this particular episode of the podcast can be found at socialmediaandmarketing.com.au/158. And today I have a special guest. Her name is Bronwyn Wandell, and she's from Cloud House Consulting, and she is going to convince you to keep an eye on your numbers. Bronwyn has some great advice for small business owners on this podcast. No matter how long you've been in business or how short of time you've been in business, this is a really great podcast. Advice from getting how to get paid, how to invoice correctly, how to employ, how to outsource, and so much more. And the reason why I followed this episode from last week, which is all about marketing foundations, is because this is a really good episode about your number foundations, the foundations of building the numbers and keeping an eye on your numbers of your business. Because, of course, marketing is everything. But you know what? If we don't keep an eye on our numbers, then we can certainly get skewed results. So I'm hoping that Bronwyn has some really great techniques and some great tips for you as well. So settle in and let's hear from Bronwyn, who loves numbers and just might convince you to love them as well. Bronwyn, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. Welcome.
Thank you, Jen. I'm absolutely delighted to be here. Thank you for having me.
Oh, my pleasure. My pleasure. Can you tell my audience who perhaps don't know you quite yet a little bit about yourself and a little bit about your business?
Sure. My name is Bronwyn Wandell, and I'm the founder of Cloud House Consulting. Cloud House was launched in 2018, and we help female creatives in their business. So we provide compliance like tax services, BAS services, we provide business advice, and we also jump in and do one-on-one sessions with clients as well. So we chose to work with women because when I was working in corporate world, I found that a lot of women who came in and previously saw male accountants, they would ask questions, but they walked out feeling that they hadn't learnt anything. So I find that we connect really well with women, and they're actually a lot more open with us. And instead of sitting there in a meeting and not understanding and walking out, they'll actually go, I don't get it. So I think it's really important that we change the way that women are in business and the way that women do business, because there's some fantastic business owners out there who pretty much are changing the way the business landscape is operating now.
Yeah, I love my accountant, Bernie. I've cried in front of her. Like, things sometimes just get too much, and, the tears come out and that sort of thing. So, she has a lot to cope with me. 2018, you started your business. So very similar time to what I started this business. Didn't we choose the timing just right? Goodness me, haven't we?
It is, I think, yeah, we had a couple of normal years, and then it just all went a little bit haywire. So it has been, the last couple of years have definitely been very interesting for small business owners. And I think it sort of made people really sort of double down on what's important to them, with their lifestyle and being with family and having people in their lives, like how important that is to their success and their well-being.
Yeah, and you're also interestingly from a rural area. So how do you find doing business in a rural area? Do you find like there's any particular pros and cons to doing that? Or has I guess COVID, one of the positives come that, people are much more willing to do things online and distance and location doesn't sort of matter so much?
Um, when I started Cloud House, I wanted to do things differently. So I actually started out online from day one. I had a really great client when I worked at my last job, and she helped me get set up. So I had two really, really beautiful mentors, and they were both women in the community. One's about 45 minutes away and the other one's local, and both of them really supported me. And they said, there's no reason why you can't do what you want to do. So I started out, set my business up, set it all up and, had it all automated and everything was just beautiful, but I had no clients. It was the age old thing, like no one knows I'm here. So I had to get out there, had to do things. So I worked with a couple of business coaches as well. And then I just started to meet a really beautiful community of other business owners, and it's just gone from there.
Yeah, great. I love that. Yeah, your network is definitely very relative to your net worth. Yeah, 100%. One of the little things when we were sort of discussing, talking points for today, one of the ones that really stuck out to me because, I guess this podcast is called Small Business Made Simple, and anyone who's a long time listener will often hear me say you've got to make yourself easy to buy from. Like otherwise, if you put up too many doors, people just simply won't buy from you. So when you brought up the point of, make yourself easy to pay, it was kind of like, that's like the next step. I'm saying, make yourself easy to buy from. And you're basically saying, yeah, and you need to make that next bit easy as well. Can you walk us through that a little bit? Give us some tips and tricks on how we can actually make it easy for people to actually pay us.
Absolutely. The reason why I included that point was there was a report done by Xero that was done in about 2019, and it found that over half of all invoices that are owed to small to medium business, 53% on average are paid late. Now, that's a huge issue for small business because it impacts on their ability to grow and also their ability to cover their operating expenses. So if you are, if you're doing the work for a client and sending it out and they're not paying you, say your invoice terms are, 14 days, if it's not getting paid for another 14 days, then that's huge on your cash flow because you're expecting that cash in 7 days, but it mightn't come for another 7 to 14 to 21 days. So there's a couple of ways that you can make sure that you do get paid on time. And these seem really simple, but I've seen this so often with people starting out. Include your payment details really clearly on your tax invoice. So you can either have those details in bold and use a font that's easy to read. Quite often when we go through working with creatives and they'll say, I can't get paid, or, people are really slow to pay. So we always have a look at the invoices that they send if they're generating them themselves. And we found that one of our clients that we took on, she actually hadn't even put her payment details on the invoice. So that's why she wasn't getting paid. The other trick is don't put those details in small print, because if you are someone who's around my age group who wears glasses, it is it's a lot easier to read something in large print than small print. If you're using software, you can use a payment provider. So nowadays you've got options such as Stripe or PayPal, and you can connect those in the back of your software. Now, these payment providers, they charge you a fee, but they make it so much easier for your client to pay you. And the reason why I say that is those fees that the payment providers charge you, they're a cost of doing business, so they're deductible. But the other thing they do is they reduce the amount of time that you have to chase clients for payment. The easier you make it for someone to pay you, the less likely you are to have to keep chasing them for payment. It's the old, it's the old KISS principle. So using software like Xero, you can connect these in the back end. And if you use things like Stripe, you can choose whether or not you pass the payment charges on to the client. So you can tick that in your back end.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I just add one little point, I guess, again, for, a person who's 47 and does have reading glasses. National Bank really do my head in with their long numbers, and like there's 11 of them, and they're all in one long space, and for me it's kind of like I have to triple check to make sure sometimes I think I'm a little bit dyslexic and I transfer numbers. If they would just break it up into lots of 3 or lots of 4 or lots of 2 and 3 or something, it would make it so much easier to type into your phone or into your payment for the very first time. Like after that it gets saved, but that's one thing that does do my head in, is big long numbers that don't have any spaces in them to help with reading.
Absolutely. So I mean, that's the thing. Just make your payment details and your terms really clear, and especially if you're on your phone, like it's even smaller on your phone. So if you're not on your laptop, or your desktop computer, it's even smaller. So that's why it has to be super clear. Not everyone's got fantastic eyesight anymore, and you just want to minimize the chance of errors occurring.
Yeah, and putting up a door, I guess, putting up a bit of a roadblock for someone who perhaps like, I can't pay that bill, I need to find my glasses. And, we all know what happens. Sometimes we get distracted by the next thing and don't come back. So that's a bit of a good lead in, I guess, to the next question was, what should invoices look like? What are the things that should be on invoices, or is there an aesthetic way that invoices should look?
Well, there's a couple of different ways we can look at this, actually. So if you're registered for GST and if you're not registered for GST.
Okay, well, that was probably one of my questions. So we might do that one first, I guess, and then we'll get to the invoices, because, it is a question that I see a lot in my small businesses that I work with, is when is the time to register for GST? I've had a couple of clients that registered, then the pandemic hit, so they probably didn't have to in the end. So they've had to sort of sort that out and discuss that. But what do you have, any tips or tricks around that?
Yeah, there is. GST it's one of those things that it is quite easy once you know where to look for the information. So the ATO has so much information on this. If you can't get it from your advisor or your bookkeeper, go to www.ato.gov.au and just type in GST, and there's so much information in there. Type in, when to register for GST. So GST for someone starting out, if you are a for-profit business, it's when your turnover hits 75,000. So it's $75,000 on a rolling basis. So it's not within a financial year, it's on a rolling basis. So it means the month we're in and the previous 11 months, or the month we're in and the next 11 months if you're doing it on a projected basis. So, and GST is based on your sales, not your profit. So it's when you hit that $75,000 in sales, and you must register for GST. Even if you've only got $5,000 profit showing, you must register for GST when you hit that 75,000. If you're a not-for-profit entity, the turnover threshold is 150,000. So there's and there's a couple of little different rules in there as well. So you can register for GST on a monthly, quarterly or annual basis. But most people, when they're starting out, will just be registering on the quarterly or annual basis.
Yeah. And I must admit, I actually didn't know it was on a rolling basis. I actually thought it was within a financial year. So there you go. That's something I've learned.
And the other thing as well, like there's a couple of little GST commandments that we always sort of mention to our clients as well. So the first one is, like, the first GST commandment is you can't charge GST if you're not registered. Quite often we see people, they start out and they're charging GST and they're not registered. So you actually can't do that. And if you do that, you have to, contact those clients and let them know that that's occurred. So, and the other thing, the second one is if you register for GST, then you have to charge GST. You can't choose whether or not you charge it. With any sort of tax law, though, there's a couple of exceptions to this. And,
no way.
Yeah.
There's lots of list of exceptions in tax law.
I know, that's why it's so easy to navigate. So there's a couple of things. So if you, say you're based in Australia and you're invoicing an overseas client, then you don't charge them GST. So things like that, if it's, on fresh fruit and veg, you won't be charging GST. So there's a couple of exceptions to the rule. As always, though, if you're setting your business up and you're in one of those grey areas, you need to get really good advice from your advisor on that.
Yeah, get some great advice first up, so there's no grey area left when you have to then front up to the ATO.
Well, no, because you don't want to get to the end of the tax year and find out that you should have been charging GST, or you've overcharged GST or under declared, and then you have to pay additional money to the ATO. It just causes business owners stress. So just, invest in the time from the start and get it right.
Yeah, such great advice. I think people need to know where to go, and I guess that's what I love so much about having guests on the podcast, but also the ATO website and things like that, although probably for some small business owners it is a little bit overwhelming, so they really do need that voice that can explain it in more layman's terms, or really just the terms that relate to them. So now we've sort of gone through that bit. Let's go back to the invoices. What should be on invoices? What shouldn't be on invoices? And is there a way they should be set up?
So there's a few things when you're having a look at an invoice. So there's two different ones. So if you're registered for GST, you'll have a tax invoice. If you're not registered for GST, you have an invoice. So if you're using software, you can set this all up in the back, but you need to have like your name, your address, your ABN, contact details. It needs to have date, the customer name. There'll be a description of the goods, the unit price. And if you're not registered for GST, make it really easy for the people you're selling to and put on there, not currently registered for GST. Okay, just so it's just a sort of business courtesy that you can do to someone buying from you, because otherwise they have to spend time looking up your ABN, working it out and going from there.
Because they might make the mistake of thinking that it's GST included or something like that. Yeah, good point.
And claiming that. So it could be, it could be causing an issue further down the track. It's just making everyone's life easy. When you are registered for GST, we have a couple of, there's a couple of little different things on there. So it'll say tax invoice on there. But you're supposed to give people an invoice when they buy goods of more than $82.50 from you. It's supposed to automatically give people an invoice, and that's $75 plus the $7.50 GST. So that, that goes on there. And if someone asks you for an invoice, I think by law you are required to provide one within 28 days to them.
They like the 75s, don't they? $75, 75,000. Tax office has got a little thing, 75.
So that's, it's just making it easy. And of course, always put your payment details on there. That's the other thing.
I find a lot of small businesses, like, I guess, dealing with maybe a plumber or an electrician, or, someone who perhaps, might be a side hustle for them or something like that. It's one of the things that is often missing from an invoice is the payment details. My husband will say, "Can you pay this?" And I'm like, "Yep," if they tell me how, and give it back to him. Go back to them with how. Because we don't write checks. I remember doing the bookwork for the farm, going back 20 years ago, and I would literally probably write 60, 70 checks a month out, sit down and write all the checks, and you'd always have a huge packet of stamps and things like that. Like, you just don't do that anymore. It's all electronic. So yeah, it's kind of like, I can't pay them, we don't have a checkbook anymore, try again. So yeah, I just love that it's such a simple point, and yet it is something that people do miss for sure. One of the other things that you really like to sort of talk to your clients about through Cloud House Consulting is the ability to grow and expand, and therefore outsource what they're actually doing. Can you sort of talk a little bit about how you work with your clients there, or your advice around outsourcing and employing staff?
Sure. What we have a look at first is we have a look at we go through and have a look at where they're at, what their structure is, and what they need. So if they are looking at someone to come on, it depends on the business as well. If they're looking for someone to just come on and do some work with them, it could be that they're looking at a contractor. But this is where, tax gets a little bit grey as well, because even if they're a contractor, sometimes you can still be liable to pay super for that contractor. So we usually go through and have a look at what they're going to be doing, where they're based, the work they're going to be doing, if there's going to be a contract in place. And then we go through the employee versus contractor tool on the ATO website. We then complete that in full PDF and save a copy of that decision. So that goes through and lets you know what, based on your answers, what the ATO would classify them as.
So I think everybody who's got a virtual assistant just had a mini tiny heart attack, including myself.
So if they're a virtual assistant and you are, if you're working with them and they're based and they're working with other clients as well, if they're not just working solely and wholly for you, then it should be fine. But a lot of the time you can get to that stage. So say you've got someone and they're coming in, like if they were coming into your premises, like if they're coming to your farm and they're doing work for you 2 days a week, Monday and Tuesday, and they do that every week, then they're probably not a contractor, they're an employee. So this is what the ATO is cracking down on. If you have a VA though that you're using, and say you're based where you are and they're in South Australia and they're your VA, then they're really not going to be an employee for you if they're working for 20 other people as well.
Yeah. Okay.
So that's the difference, we're going through there. And if they're providing their own laptop and, paying for their own internet and things like that, that's where the difference lies there. With your employing new staff though, so even if you have a contractor come on, I would suggest that you get a contract done. If you are having, if you're subcontracting work, get a contract done so everyone knows what they're responsible for. If it's an employment contract, the contract will cover, the start date, whether the employee is full-time, part-time, casual, what's expected, what the working conditions are, where they can work from, how the employee gets paid, how much they get paid, their leave entitlements, and also it goes through into notice as to termination. So there's a couple of places you can look for those contracts as well. There's contracts on Fair Work, but there's also agencies out there now like Founded Legal or Club Sandwich HR, and they will help you do the HR contracts and things like that with staff, help you with the onboarding process.
Yeah,
So if
like
you,
from my law background, I'm kind of like contract. So yeah, she's singing my song there for sure. You know, just really, even just to protect yourself. That at the end of the
absolutely,
day, that's why you need a contract, to protect yourself.
absolutely, and it's, you know, if you just employ someone over over a handshake, and then there's no guidelines for how either of you are going to operate. You know,
Yeah.
there's nothing clear there.
No.
And they might say, oh, oh, it's okay. I just, I need 2 weeks off. And it's like, well, I've got these 5 projects that need finishing. I need you working. So it needs to be defined from the start.
Yeah, because you're dealing with humans and we have different expectations. That's what makes us so unique and different, but, can also cause a lot of bumps in the road as well. So, yeah, absolutely. I love that.
Absolutely. So it is, so if you are going to go down the route where you employ someone, you have to get, like, there's 3 compulsory bits of documentation. So there's tax file number declaration, there is Fair Work information statement, and there's also the choice of super form. So all of those have to be given to your employees when they start. And the other thing that we sort of guide people through is work cover. It's different for each state. I know in my business, I'm based in SA, but my staff are based in Queensland. They're employed in Queensland. So we have a workers' comp policy in SA and one in Queensland. So just be aware that if you have employees, then you need to, and each state's different. I know in SA, we don't need to pay work cover until we hit about $13,000 in total wages. But other states, it's, as soon as you employ.
Do you think that is something that should be nationalised?
I think it would make it a lot easier.
I feel like a lot of these policies and a lot of these, and this is probably not so good for a podcast discussion, but this is probably putting my own thoughts out there a little bit too much. But I think the one thing we've learned from this pandemic is how we are a nation and how we are, our borders, well, they do matter, but they shouldn't matter. Like, you can work with anyone anywhere. And I think things like that are from the old age are really just complicating things for small business owners.
I think they are, because when you have a look at it, there are different work cover sites for each state and territory. So it just makes it a lot more complicated, and especially when we work with clients in pretty much every state of Australia. So it's getting the information, for their specific business in that state through to them, and it's checking that they are doing the reconciliations as well, because I know in SA we have to do ours within 14 days of end of financial year, whereas in New South Wales and Queensland it's completely different. The policy renewal, so it'd help if they're all standardized for life.
There you go. I put it out to the universe. Are they listening? We will see. And if they are, I had a huge influence on that if it happens to change. So yes.
It was Jen.
yeah. It was Jen complaining on her own podcast. But anyway, the one thing I've seen, Bronwyn, probably, with having Buy From a Bush business and Spend With Us and also my social media and marketing business, I have seen a lot of people start businesses in the last 18 months. They've kind of either lost their jobs, lost their way, started to follow their passion, whichever way it went for them. So for someone who might be listening to this podcast that is a startup that hasn't thought too much around their finances or, who to consult or what to do, what would be your number one tip for them as a pure startup who perhaps is, it might even be a side hustle. So it might not be necessarily a huge revenue generator, but maybe more of a passion project. But where should they start with trying to get their head around what it is that you do as a profession?
Okay, so if someone was starting out or they're entertaining thoughts of starting a business, I would say to them, just get a piece of paper and seriously write down everything that you're good at. Write down a list of questions that people ask you for advice on all the time, and go through it and have a look at that list that you've written and sort of have a look at what people are asking you for the time. And I would say, and then start working out whether or not you can monetize that, whether you can turn that into something that people pay you for. So if they're, and once you've got that list, I would have a look at, there's a couple of really good ways you can sort of sit down and work through this. You can do the old back of the envelope calculation. And this is, farmers use this, you used to use this all the time.
Don't throw that into my bag. It's got stuff on it. Heard it.
So there's a couple of things in there. So you can work through it. So if you're serious about turning this into something that's going to generate some money for you, I would have a look at it and just write it down, on the back of the envelope, like my rent is this much, power, electricity going out is this much, my credit card repayments are this much. This is what it's going to cost me per week. This is what it's going to cost me per month and per year. And have a look at that figure, because then you can sort of go, okay, so if I'm going to start this new business, this is the amount of money I have to make to just cover my costs. If I want to make a profit, if I want to go on holidays, if I want to go out to dinner, then I have to make a bit more. So it is, if you're starting it off as a side, as a side business, then that's something that you can put your time and energy into, and just do it for fun and see if you like it. Because sometimes when you start doing that, you might go, oh, I don't actually enjoy that, but I like working for myself. So you might tweak your idea as well about what you're actually going to offer and provide to people, like how you can serve them.
Yeah, and listen to the audience who you want to buy from you, and what are they saying and things like that. I love that calculation thing. I know when I had my retail shop, we did a calculation, and before I opened the door every single day, I knew how much money I needed to earn to cover my costs, and then I knew how much to reach the profit goal that we had set for the 12 months. Some days, it would do your head in knowing as you opened that door, and other days it didn't. But we would always share that information with our employees as well, so they knew, this is what we're working towards. This is what it looks like. This is what it takes to open this front door, and we need your help to help us reach our goals as well. So like knowing that figure sometimes was a bit of an evil thing to know, and at other times it was a great thing to know, depending on the cycle of retail, of course. But it was still really good to have that figure to come back on.
It is good to have that figure. And the other thing as well is, if you have, you might start out initially as a side project, but in 12 to 18 months' time, it might be your goal to leave your employment and go out and start your own business. So you're going to be learning about yourself on the way, and you're going to be learning about clients. And starting that business is going to be one of the biggest learning curves in human nature that you're going to have.
And such an exciting journey as well. It will definitely have its ups and downs. Bronwyn, this has been such a great chat. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing all your knowledge and your wisdom. I really appreciate it. And I know that my audience would love that. Will love this interview as well. Where can people get in contact with you?
Okay, so best place to find us is www.cloudhouse.consulting. We're on Instagram, cloudhouse_consulting, and we're also on Facebook.
Beautiful. Excellent. Again, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate your time today. And please, I will put all those links in the show notes, of course, where people can find them.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jen.
Doesn't Bronwyn have the most calming voice? She talks so passionately about business and numbers in such a soft, convincing voice. I just loved interviewing her and chatting with her and getting to know her a little bit more. So I hope that she has convinced you to look at your numbers or look at your business just that little bit different. Of course, I'd love to hear from you in the Like-Minded Business Owners Facebook group and let me know which tip Bronwyn gave you that helped you the most. Of course, for me, as I said in the podcast, I didn't actually know that registering for GST was on a rolling basis. I don't know whether I thought it was for a financial year or a calendar year or just really hadn't thought about it. So that's what I learned. So what did you learn? Head to the Like-Minded Business Owners Facebook group and let me know what you learnt as well. But that's it for episode 158. If you haven't subscribed to this podcast, then hit that little button and subscribe so you don't miss another episode, and maybe even share this episode with another superstar business owner who's doing that daily business grind, who would really appreciate someone making their business life a little bit simpler. Leave a rating and review if you've got time. My heart warms every time I see one of those, and I am extremely thankful for that. But I will see you next week on episode 159. But in the meantime, like I said, let's hang out and get social on social. You'll find me on Instagram at JenDonovan_. Come and join the Like-Minded Business Owners group on Facebook, or of course, let's have a chat in LinkedIn. But whatever you do, my small business peeps, as my opening song says, there is no point in dreaming small.
No time like the present. Tell it like you feel it, say it proud, be true, and let us see you for the star that you are. No point in dreaming small.
I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land, the Yorta Yorta people, on which I record this podcast and conduct my business today, and pay my respects to their elders, past and present. I extend this respect to the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people here with us today as well.